Hi, I'm Mike Miller. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks so much for checking out The Other Side. My guest today plays a handpan, and I'm honored to have Gracen Lee here today.
Hi.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Did I say that right? Handpan?
Handpan, that's correct.
Handpan.
Yes.
That I was doing a little research on it. When were those instruments created?
So based on my own personal research, the instrument was invented in the year 2000.
Okay, yeah.
By a woman named Sabina, and gentleman, I can't remember his name now. Anyway, they live in Switzerland.
Switzerland,
That's
yeah.
correct, right. So my understanding is that they came from the tradition of making Trinidadian steel drums.
Oh, yeah.
So they were very familiar with how to work with the metal and make a sound out of a metal.
Tones, yeah.
Right. And then in the around year 2000, I think they have a company called Pen Art, and they have decided to create a brand new instrument based on their knowledge of the metals and the Trinidadian steel drum. And what they actually call their instrument is called hang, H-A-N-G.
Oh, really?
Right. Again, based on my own research, they do not actually like their instrument to be called drums for whatever the reason. So they don't actually call their instrument hang drum. They actually simply call it hang. And the word H-A-N-G, my understanding is that particular dialect within the Switzerland area that they live in, hang actually means hand.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's not the English word hang,
Yeah.
whereas a lot of people will pronounce as a hang.
Hang, yeah.
But my understanding is that the correct pronunciation is closer to hang, which is a Swiss word.
Swiss word,
Right,
yeah.
right. So that's where it was invented. And the reason my particular instrument is called the handpan is it's not made by Pen Art.
Oh, okay.
So only the instruments that are made by Pen Art is called hang, because hang is a trademarked term.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So again, this is all based on my personal research. I'm somewhat of a research geek. So they made this instrument from 2000 to about, I think, 2011 or so, or somewhere like that. So my understanding also is that in order for you to be able to get one of these hang during the time, you were invited to write an essay and mail it to Sabina and her partner.
Oh.
And they will actually review the interview, the article and the letter. And if you're picked by them, then you'll be invited to visit their workshop in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And then they'll meet with you. And then if you pass that particular hurdle, then they'll actually create an instrument for you.
Really?
Right. And my feeling from reading about the company and the owners of the company is that they're very much into hands and craft.
Yeah.
They also seem to be what I would call like anti-globalization.
Oh, really?
Kind of mindset where they didn't want their instrument to become mass-produced or just extremely popular. They weren't looking for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's why they were very selective in terms of who the instrument is going to go to.
Yes.
Also, another thing that I read is that at the time when you actually bought hang from Pen Art, you actually would have to sign a document that said when you actually sell it to another person, that you could not actually increase the value.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you had to sell to another person at the exact same price that you got it for.
So it holds the values down.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I think that they come from very much this anti-mass production, that kind of thing. So again, the reason why mine is called a handpan is that since 2011, they actually decided to stop making hang.
Yeah.
At that time.
Which would tend to make the values go up.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I first was researching to get one of these about a year and a half or 2 years ago, I actually saw one for sale on eBay or something like that for like the original hang, $17,000.
Oh, so they increased the price.
Right, because of so I guess some people decided really not to abide by that thing.
The rules, yeah.
So since 2011, what happened is that a handful of people in North America and Europe decided they're going to reverse engineer this instrument.
Really?
Right. I actually use the term reverse engineer to describe this process because they could not try to copy the instrument because they would be violating copyright law.
Copyright infringement.
Right, infringement. So they basically tried to get away with some way of constructing this instrument without violating their copyright. Even today, there has been a lot of controversy among the new hand pan makers
Versions, yeah.
and pan art, where I think as recently as about 2-3 months ago, there was a lawsuit. At some point, I think pan art did file a lawsuit in terms of copyright infringement. So again, I will get to the point about why it's called hand pan. The reason why it's called hand pan is that because they could not use the name Hang for these instruments that they were reverse engineering,
Oh yeah.
they had to come up with a name that describes this instrument.
Oh yeah.
So my understanding is that in North America, people sort of had generally agreed that it was going to be called a hand pan. Interestingly, in Europe, they took on another name.
Really?
Yeah, and that name is pantam. So in European or even Asian places, some places, they're more known as pantams, whereas over here it's called the hand pans.
Yeah.
And again, just to give you a quick a historical background about where the pantam word comes from, is that my understanding is that someone in Israel decided to start making this instrument, and this particular called it pantam.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what the etymology of that particular word is, but somehow it kind of took off over there in the European side.
Yeah.
So that's why in Europe that's called pantam. So therefore, mine is simply that why it's called a hand pan.
When did you first hear about these?
So today, this is about September. I would not estimate between 18 months to 24 months at that period, about 2 years ago or so.
And then you bought your first one?
My first, well, the only one, about a year and a half ago.
Year and a half ago?
Yeah, yeah. So there was a quite of an interesting path that I had taken.
Are there some cups under the top of it that hold oil?
Oh, wow, okay. That's an interesting idea. So it's in construction, it's a quite simple concept. So it's essentially what they have done is the Trinidadian steel drum is essentially concave. And so it's got little areas where it can hit with rubber mallets.
Yeah, for different notes.
Right.
And each one is a different size and gives a different pitch.
That is correct, right?
Yeah.
I think the way that they can manipulate the metal to produce a certain particular tone is by hammering the area, creating certain density of that particular metal.
Hammered metal.
Yeah. So there's a lot of hammering involved in constructing both the hand pans and the Trinidadian steel drums.
Really, yeah.
But what the Sabina and the gentleman essentially did is they actually made it convex, so it comes up this way.
Oh yeah.
Right. So that's the top piece, and also they made it so where you actually play with your hand. So that's where the name Hang, hand, came from.
Yeah.
And the bottom part is essentially another metal, also this way.
Yeah.
But it's got a little hole in the middle. So essentially, when you put those two things together, it's essentially hollow inside. And the hole right here is called a gu. That's the name of the hole.
How do you spell that?
Gu.
Oh.
And I think again, based on my limited knowledge, I think gu does come from an Indian instrument.
Really?
That has a similar shape, like a
Similar,
hole.
yeah.
And the word, I think, gu was taken by Indian tradition.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So there's no place to hold oil or any other kind. So it's essentially two pieces of metal that are glued together. So that's how the hand pan instrument is constructed.
And you started making music with it shortly after you acquired one?
Yes, I essentially acquired one, and for the first 8 or 9 months or so, I essentially practiced with it in my bedroom alone.
Learn how to play it.
Right. And the way that I learned is simply practicing different patterns and it was very intuitive level in terms of if it sounded good to me, I would continue to practice that particular pattern. Of notes.
Yeah.
If I try something else and it doesn't sound good, I would actually abandon and not practice that particular pattern.
Yeah.
Because I don't have any formal educational in terms of the
You
music.
didn't study music.
I didn't study
earlier
music.
in life
I
or
don't
anything?
know how to read music.
Really?
I'm actually just learning what scales actually mean, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that was about a year and a half ago, and the difficulty, well, actually, both difficulty and ease of learning this instrument. The reason why I say ease is that the instrument only has 8 notes.
Okay.
It's not like the piano.
Yeah.
It's not like a guitar where you can create any note that you want. This one is very much more like a harmonicas are made.
Yeah.
So again, this is something that I had learned just recently, that harmonicas are made to a certain, what they call key, like a D minor or F major, or C major. So in the same sense that each handpan is made to a key, so mine only has 8 notes to play with.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes the playing with it simpler, because you're not dealing with almost infinite number of keys. But the difficulty is that since I don't know how to read music, the primary source of trying to learn how to do visually was to look at YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And on YouTube videos, there are many, many players, but the problem is that they don't necessarily have the same notes or notes as mine.
Oh, if
So
it's
even
a different size, it has
different sizes or
yeah.
even different notes.
Yeah.
So even if I watch somebody and actually I like the way that they're doing a pattern by locating where they're hitting, even if I was able to mimic exactly the same pattern and the movement, mine sound be very different.
Yeah.
So everything just had to be intuitively to figure out what I find to be pleasing.
Yes.
And what I find to be disharmonious, and then so that's how I learned the way I played.
What is some of your favorite music though over the years?
Oh, I grew up. I went through my most impressionable years during 1970s.
Yeah.
So I was influenced by some popular music during the 1970s.
Yes.
So I remember listening to ABBA, for example.
ABBA, yeah.
Yeah,
where did you live in the 70s?
In Korea.
In Korea.
So ABBA was huge.
They were huge
Yeah,
over
yeah,
there.
yeah.
They
And
were
again, I
over-
wasn't very familiar with the whole disco scene in the United States because I wasn't here.
Yeah.
But I know that at least ABBA was just phenomenal over there.
Were the Beatles and Stones big in Korea?
Actually, no. One of the reasons why those guys weren't very popular in Korea is that during the time, the political regime of Korea is essentially a one-man dictatorship.
Oh yeah.
And particular president basically had a very strict censorship that was implemented. So therefore, any music that's considered subversive
Yeah.
or challenging the authority, it was actually banned. I remember you could not buy Another Brick on the Wall by Pink Floyd,
yeah.
the Wall album.
Something like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was literally it was banned. It was illegal
Yeah.
for you to try to get one. So so any rock and roll type of thing.
But ABBA was cool.
ABBA was
And
it
they
was
just sang love
completely
songs.
harmless,
Yeah.
right? Right. So that's one of the reasons why I was only exposed to ABBA. So I came from that background, but over the years, my musical tastes have changed, and so it's kind of skipped 30, 40 years today, right before I got into that music. As I got into the music early on, what is now known as New Age music.
Yes.
Okay. Back when it started with the Windham Hill record, those guys.
Oh yeah.
Right, right. So I got into Windham Hill record.
Oh really? Yeah.
Right. And it was more, to me, there was more of a acoustic. Right, right. Like
Easy
almost
listening.
easy listening, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now it's called the New Age. So, and then I got into some electronic music.
Oh really?
That was much more what they call now ambient.
Like
right?
synthesizing
Synthesizer music, right,
Yeah,
right. So those are the kind of musical tastes that I have experienced up until now.
Well, that makes sense.
Okay.
Was it a shock when you first moved over to America?
Yes. Okay, so especially I think it was difficult for me is the fact that I had just was about to turn 18 years old when I first came to the United States.
Yeah.
And that age where I was basically yearning for acceptance,
Yeah.
being recognized, and those kind of things.
Yes.
And also, this was in early 1980s, so the whole anti-bullying was not even a concept.
Oh, the whole what?
The anti-bullying. I mean, now everybody talks about bullying, and then there's a movement anti-bullying. People who are being bullied at school.
Oh yeah.
Right. Back then, we didn't really talk about anything of that nature, and also the sort of like overt expression of racism, especially against Asians.
Really?
In the 1980s, again, nobody talked about it because everybody kind of saw it happening a lot of places in movies and popular media during the time. So those kind of things made it very difficult. Also, my inability to communicate in English was obviously very, very difficult. So yes, so
you had to really focus on learning English when you were age 18.
Yeah, like I said, I think I came like 4 months before I turned 18.
Yeah.
So I learned essentially how to speak English when I first came to the country.
That's really challenging.
It is difficult, yes. I would consider it to be, if I had to pick one singular event that shapes my character today, the experience that I had, and again, experience lasted for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't really feel, feel like I actually overcame the difficulty of cultural shock, not until having spent about maybe 10, 15 years in the country.
Yeah.
And for the past 15 years now, I feel very, very comfortable.
Yeah, and Denton is a good place to live.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, the whole milieu of the country have changed quite tremendously, especially me as an Asian American, in terms of experiencing very explicit form of racist comments throughout all age groups when I first came, and I've witnessed gradually how social standards have changed to today.
Yeah.
So that's obviously something that I was able to witness, and I was able to be impressed by.
Yeah.
Yeah. So things like that obviously made it.
There have been movements going on. It seems like for people to try to make that go away. The prejudice,
yeah, of
attitudes,
course.
and all that.
Right.
That we're all just people, and
absolutely. Yep.
Try to get along well in our world.
Yep, that will be, reminds me of the John Lennon song, right? Imagine.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, that's a good song.
Yeah.
What kind of work do you do during the day?
I sell mattresses.
Oh, mattresses?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm in retail sales, which is
cool.
another whole, just absolutely wonderful and challenging aspect of my life. I find sales to be both extremely challenging as well as amusing, actually.
Yeah.
Because you're basically dealing with human behavior in terms of their decision-making process.
Yeah.
And another thing I like about, I like and dislike about this particular type of sales, that you as a salesperson, you're not just dealing with one person's dynamic in terms of decision-making process. Because most people, when they come to buy mattress, they come in pairs.
Couple, yeah.
Right. So it's really interesting that as a person, how I'm going to deal with the interdynamics of the
one
two people.
wants one thing and one wants another.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes they both want the same thing. So I get to witness all kinds of interesting interplay of relationships.
You've had to learn a lot to manipulate people at that level, I guess. In a
Yeah, I
positive
mean,
way.
I'm not sure if I would use the word manipulate.
mean to, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. I do obviously observe
Yeah.
and learn and respond
Yeah,
to
respond.
what they're doing. But like I said, it is a very, I would say to anyone out there who wants to learn about humans and their behaviors and their relationships and their decision-making process, psychology, sociology, economics.
Work in sales a few years.
Yeah. I think sales has been, I mean, compared to any other careers that I've had, sales is really is focused on what makes a person tick. How do they make decisions?
How do they make decisions?
Yeah.
And everybody, there's an impulse buying. Sometimes people get too tired and they're just ready to buy something. And
that happens too. Like I said, it's a literally range of human behaviors. I've had people who come into the store immediately and say, "I just want the most expensive one you have."
Yeah.
You have that thing. But obviously, most people fall somewhere in the between.
in between,
Right.
yeah.
And the cool thing is that I sometimes use this particular analogy. There's a term called black swan event. It actually was coined by a British economist.
Really?
He wrote a book, and he basically defines the thing called black swan event as a event that happens in human history that is significant enough where it alters the course of that particular discipline, whether it's economics or finances or social movement, things like that.
Yeah.
I think as an example, I don't know if this book was written before or after, but I would imagine that 9/11 is an example of what he calls a black swan event.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different characteristics of black swan event. One is it has to be significant enough where it actually alters the course of history in a significant way.
Yeah.
But the most interesting definition that he has about a black swan event is that the characteristic of black swan event is that although in reality no one could have connected the dots to predict the onset of a black swan event, after the fact, everybody will think that they could have connected the dots.
Yeah.
Right, and if you study the 9/11 event,
that's what they think. Yeah.
Right. There was a lot of like how did the FBI and CIA fail to connect the dots? That kind of thing. So I basically consider any sales that I make with a person a basically mini-scale black swan event. Like in other words, I have accepted the fact that I actually have no idea until they actually sign a piece of paper and says I will pay this much, whether the sale is going to happen.
Oh yeah.
And there are a lot of people in sales who seem to think that they could somehow predict that beforehand, therefore manipulate the outcome to come to the outcome they like to see.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm one of those people who consider the sales process pretty much the same way that the people who might look at black swan event is that even though I like to think that I have a way to manipulate somehow their process to come to the successful sales at the end, I chose to believe that that's not the case. So I could basically call them mini black swan events.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. I appreciate all that.
Sure.
I want to hear you play some music, so I'm going to get out of the way and let you play some music for us.
Okay, then. I will do that.
Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoy the music of Gracen Lee and enjoy hearing this hand drum played. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Gracen Lee. I'm going to improvise next 6 or 7 minutes. I did not prepare a song, but everything will be just spontaneously generated, and I hope you enjoy.
you want, and money will come.